to ask because you never know. All right, we are going to be live in a few seconds here. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Cannabis Nurses of Color. This is our live speaker series, and today is March 21st, I believe. I should have checked that date before I started talking, but we are so excited today. If you haven't joined our speaker series before, this is where we bring you educators and information about the cannabis industry that can really help your nursing profession and the healthcare profession kind of move along here. So we are super excited to be here. I have my partner in crime, Ivory Rosenthal, who will be helping me moderate today. And then we have two very special guests with us today. We have Uwe Bleshing and Doug Reil, and they are with us here from Cannakeys, and they have developed this amazing database and software where we can actually find wonderful evidence-based information about cannabis at our fingertips. I'm so excited to have them here because they're going to share a little bit about, how this has come up, how it can help us, and also give us a little demo while they're on here, which is amazing. So full disclosure, we are not affiliated with Cannakeys. However, I have been using Cannakeys for about 2 weeks now for my own personal purposes, here at my business. And it has been quite exciting because normally when people come to me and ask me about certain conditions or what the science says about a cannabinoid or anything, I'm really relegated to Googling, and looking up that information and then going to some evidence-based documentation, but also knowing that it's a wealth of information. Like you kind of have to, it's an ocean of information to navigate. And so this kind of gives you kind of snapshots of what information is out there. I'm not going to give all the goodies away because this is what they do, but I've been following you guys now, so it's exciting to see how long. First of all, introduce yourselves and say anything you want about Cannakeys, really. But I'd love to know, how long has Cannakeys been in the world? How long ago did you guys launch this?
Sure. And hi, everybody. And Sandra, thanks so much for the invite. It's nice to be with the Cannabis Nurses of Color community. My name is Doug Reil, and I'm the co-founder and CEO of Cannakeys. And I've been doing work around cannabis compassion, compliance, and community building for a number of years now. But really, my entree into cannabis healthcare is as a patient. I've been working with my Crohn's disease on the patient pathway for 4 decades now. So wow. My engagement with cannabis is really informed by that and figuring out ways to support patients. And we've been working on this project since 2016. And we've been planning a number of different platforms, but what became apparent was that understanding the data streams of the science and having ways for that to be clearly conveyed and aggregated in ways that were useful was becoming not only critical, but was becoming more difficult. And so we went from having a database of science that supported other platforms to having the Cannakeys 360 platform be our lead platform. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So let me kick it over to Uwe for his remarks.
Doug, hey everyone, pleasure to be here. My name is Uwe Bleshing, and I've been doing writing and research in and about the cannabinoid health sciences for about 12 years or so. And I've written 3 books on the subject, and I feel greatly blessed to be involved in an emerging new health sciences that brings so much hope and opportunities for especially a great number of chronic patient populations that otherwise are left with the management of symptoms and very little hope in terms of making progress in optimizing health and well-being for so many people who suffer from so many different types of conditions, and that really underlies my motivation in terms of doing research, doing writing, and building the Cannakeys platform, because so many times you hear people in the medical profession going, well, yeah, here it's good, but what's the evidence? Or there's not enough studies, or there is not enough data, not enough clinical science to provide us with guidance. And when you really dive in deep and when you really look at it, there's actually a great amount of science. When you do a brief search on PubMed, for example, one of the largest repositories of scientific literature, on the planet, when you punch in the word cannabis, you'll get in excess of 30,000 entries. Last year, there were 3,700 studies that were published in 1 year alone. And so if you project that trend outwards, it literally translates to about 10 new studies that are published on a daily basis that can be harnessed in order to provide policymakers with the tools that they need to make more informed and discerning decisions about, what conditions to approve cannabinoid-based therapeutics for. And of course, that also holds true for healthcare providers that are in the cannabis space, that are being asked and challenged by their patients. Hey, what you've been doing, for the past 10 years for my chronic hypertension hasn't really been helping me. I've heard that cannabis can work for that. Can you advise me on this? And then for the most part, everyone, like most everybody here knows, is challenged with having to do the research by themselves, going to Google, looking up hypertension. And then, your next patient comes in with, inflammatory bowel syndrome, and you have to do the same search again. And when you open up PubMed, you'll see, let's say in terms of inflammatory bowel disease, literally hundreds of studies. You have to pull them out. You have to first identify the false positives, because they still show up, even with fairly organized websites like PubMed. So you're left with, let's say 150 different trials. Now there are different trials, in terms of the weight that can be assigned to them. For instance, a laboratory test has a different substantial weight when it comes to distilling data that's relevant in the clinical setting. Only about 10% of all lab tests eventually translate into actionable data when it comes to utilizing them, in actually prescribing to a live human being. Once you get to animal trials, of course, it's about half of those, then translate into actionable data. And so there's a hierarchies of trials that you have to consider. And then you have to consider the findings. Some findings say, yes, it helps for this condition. Some other findings say, no, it's making it worse. And some other ones say, no, it's in mixed or inconclusive results. So how do you blend that into the mix to get the best data that's available in such a way that you can help your patient to steer them towards the optimal plant constituents that are then hopefully are going to make the deepest inroads and provide the deepest healing that can be experienced. And so curating the data, curating the thousands of trials that are out there is what is the task that we have taken on. And doing it in writing, as I've done for the past 10, 12 years, has been, very rewarding. It's been very fascinating, and it's been very exciting to see what cannabis can bring to the table to medicine. And but it's how do you utilize that data in a way that becomes time efficient and becomes available in such a way that it makes the biggest, it packs the biggest punch, if you will, to make a difference to an individual patient or the people that have taken on the task to provide them, to help them, to guide them, to steer them through the process of optimizing the plant constituents that are posited by the science to work optimal for a particular symptom or for a particular condition. And by the same token, of course, is how do you mitigate the adverse effects potential? What is the data saying there? What is the data talking about when it comes to creating synergies or contraindication when it comes to combining it with other pharmaceuticals? And so it's very complex, but the good thing about complexity is that it allows us to make precision decisions in a way that becomes sustainable. When you don't have complexities, it's very, very easy to cross that line between a therapeutic effect and an adverse effect. And this is one of the key things about working with cannabis or cannabinoid-based therapeutics. And that is, in its ideal form, working with cannabis is always going to be a process-oriented approach to healing. It's not going to be a silver bullet, like the way we've been used to dealing with pharmaceuticals. You have a symptoms, doctor, please give me a pill. The symptom then supposedly go away. It's just not working that way with cannabis. It's going to require a little bit more attention to detail and patient engagement, and a little bit of titration and a little bit of massaging through a process of elimination, to come to a place where the ingredients are optimal for each patient. And of course, that will change over time. As the patient gets better, the ingredient constituents ought to change accordingly. And so with that, a bit of a preamble, I'm going to pass the buck back to Doug and have him tell you a little bit more about, how we build in Cannakeys and the structure that is hopefully going to address all of these challenges that our patients and our healthcare providers are facing.
So before Doug talks, because you had said so much, Uwe, and I want to make sure that we I want to tap into some of what you said real quick. So you said you guys are curating this. So are you physically curating all these studies into this database? And then also the second question is, do you have a system or a way of kind of like vetting these studies to say these should be included or not included? I just found that interesting because I know that there's, like you mentioned before, 30,000 studies. So it's interesting to me how, I only see, if I'm looking at a condition, I may only see 10 studies, but there may be 100 studies or 100 articles, I should say, out there on these studies. So my question is, how does that get condensed down into what we see? How do you kind of curate that data?
Yeah, what we do is, we go on a regular basis or virtually on a daily basis to PubMed or other repositories like Cochrane Data Bank, for example, or PubMed Central for that matter, or Google Google is a fantastic search engine to find hidden gems of trials that sometimes slip through the cracks, but still provide valuable information. Yeah. So what we do is, David, the third person partner, our IT guy, he's built the internet or the software architecture where we then distill data points that are most valuable. And we enter them into very specific fields. Each study is being curated, and only the most valuable, the most practical data is being pulled and placed into fields that then translate automatically into a dashboard that you have access at a glance, and you've played with it for a couple of weeks, so you know how easy it is to utilize that data and to utilize that data in such a way as to inform you, to provide you with some sense of trust and confidence, or telling you how much confidence there is to be had and how much caution there is to be had at the same time. And that varies, of course, between the different conditions that are listed. And I think currently we are approaching about 240 conditions for which cannabinoid-based therapeutics show promise. Now, of course, not all of them have 150 studies associated with them. Some only have, a handful or even a fewer of them. But if they have data that's actionable and that can provide some guidance, in terms of informing people to make the most discerning decision possible, we will include those data points in a way that's really, really easy to access. And Doug can speak much more to it especially when he's going to actually show you how it's done. And there you go.
Thank you. I was going to say, Doug, before you kick into your presentation, because we're so glad to see that demo, to our viewers, if you have any questions, please go ahead and be putting your questions in the chat. And then once we finish up with the demo, we'll circle back to answer your questions. So we'll turn it over to you, Doug.
Right. Thanks, Ivory. Yeah, everything Uwe said is right on. And I would just add that, one thing to note is a question that we get is that, do we provide access to the studies beyond what's out there? And the answer is no, we don't drill through any paywalls that the journals might have. What we're accessing and reviewing and the data that we're entering is based on what is available publicly. And that also varies as well. And in some cases, there's little to no abstract or information. And those, of course, would be what Uwe would call what we call false positives, that they show up in a search result, but they don't provide any information. So we're not including those, we're not flagging those because we can't bring any additional data points into the data bank. So, but I'm gonna at this point share my screen, and it looks like I need permission to do that. But we've been working on Cannakeys for a few years now, and it's as Sandra was asking, we are reviewing the science. There's a human element to reviewing the science, but we are applying more data mining and looking into AI approaches to identifying the studies and comparing them to what's in our data bank, because we want to be as complete as possible with the best information as possible. And then, as you'll see in a moment, that we aggregate it in ways that really distill the time down and also provide some data points that provide some compass headings, as we like to think of it, as far as the direction of the research, the quality of the research, and some elements that will support patient and healthcare provider access and decision-making. So let me go ahead and share my screen. And you should all see the Cannakeys homepage. So the platform, Cannakeys 360, is a subscriber-based platform, and going to the pricing page on our website is how you can access, review the pricing, and subscribe if you're interested. But I am logged in as a subscriber would be, and to access the information, you can go to the 360 tab, and you can see the drop downs here. And I'll just say quickly, there are 4 searches to access the over 3,000 studies that we have in the data bank. And those are medical condition, cannabinoid, terpene, and organ system. So today, in the time we have, I'm going to focus on medical condition and hopefully take a look at the cannabinoid output as well. The cannabinoid and terpene outputs are very similar, and the medical condition is quite similar to the organ system output with some key differences. But the medical condition search is the search that really most people start with, whether they're a patient and they self-identify in one of these categories. And as Uwe said, we're about 240, or whether they're a healthcare provider who's maybe preparing for a patient or supporting a patient's questions with some information about the science. So this is the medical condition landing page, search landing page. There's a few ways in. You can select a condition through the drop down. There's a keyword search. And coming down here, there's a list of the top 20 conditions by the number of clinical studies. So this is one of the first ways we give some information about what's going on with the state of the science for certain conditions. And here you can see that there's a pretty sizable number of clinical studies for a number of conditions. So these top 20, the minimum has at least 7 on this top 20 list, but you can see multiple sclerosis, anxiety, and panic disorders, over 20 clinical studies. And we'll get in there to one of these in a second. And then at the bottom, if you want to just look at everything that's in here as far as conditions, at the bottom you can see the quick links. And I'll note that anybody, non-subscribers, can search any of these conditions, all that they will see is the breakdown of the science and the numbers at the top. But if you're curious, you can go to the demo and click through that, and you'll see a live study with all the information. So as a way to play around and explore what I'm about to show. So just coming down here, let's get into a condition. And we joked that this was the condition of 2020, anxiety and panic disorders. So this is when someone searches, here's what comes up. And at the top of the dashboard here, this is the breakdown of the science. And as Uwe talked about, we break it down clinical and preclinical in order of weighting of the strength of the science. And as Uwe said, the laboratory studies, those are the weakest studies when it comes to consideration of the results for how to apply it to humans medically. But they provide certainly some information, and the science grows from there. Animal studies, you can see here, there's quite a bit, a good number of them, and meta-analyses. Now this is a bigger bucket, and you can see that there's info bubbles here, which provide little clues you can just mouse over. Meta-analyses include similar weighted science, including published case studies, reviews, as well as the generally seen meta-analyses. And you can find them that way, and I'll get to how we can find things in a second. But just coming up to the top here, you can see there's 74 primary studies for this condition and 71 related. So what is that? What does that break down? So as we were building this, we realized that not all the science is created equal when it comes to associating it with a condition or a cannabinoid or a terpene. And it became clear that some were more relevant than others, some studies more relevant than others to, say, in this case, anxiety and panic disorders. So we created a criteria which can be found in our user guide, which can be accessed in a couple of places, including the search screens that we were just on. And primary studies are studies that are directly examining the condition. It might be mentioned prominently in the title of the study, or it might be specifically mentioned in the results. And so what we show in the dashboard here in these panels are primary studies. But we also wanted to reassociate studies that had relevance to the condition, but maybe weren't primary. And that's what these related studies are. So those are studies that might mention anxiety in a basket of other conditions that there might be relevance, or it might be some relevant symptom management that is also mentioned in the study. And we're working from the study and we're not inserting ourselves in here. So we're trying to be faithful reporters, but these associations are important, but we also didn't want to dilute the dashboard and wanted to kind of highlight within the associations studies that had more relevance. So these 74 studies are what you see breakdown in the clinical and preclinical study, or a breakdown. And then on the clinical side, the studies, if there's patient questions, you always look to see if there's clinical data to support the questions. And we'll dig into that more in a second, but I want to come down to the bottom of the dashboard here. So here's the rest of the dashboard at the top of the search results. So a lot of questions and a lot of talk about what is the state of the science for cannabis in general, for certain conditions, cannabinoids, et cetera. And so we created this panel that highlights if there is clinical evidence, of which there is, as we saw above, if there are FDA or EU approved endocannabinoid therapies. And for anxiety, there is not at the FDA or in the EU. And then we have overall positive results and the positivity rate of clinical results. And this is based on the constituents studied. So there's different ways to measure positivity, but we wanted to at least show what the science was coming back with, because certainly, as Uwe mentioned, you can have mixed results or inconclusive results, but you can also have negative results, which are a contraindication. And I'll note over here on the filter, that's another filtering that one can do to either find just positive results, or if you want to see even contraindications for cannabinoid, for instance, you can click on negative and see what those are. Now, the dosing is a big question mark. People want to know what the clinical dosing is or what the dosing guidance is coming out of the science. And this was a big one for us to try to pull together. And so where there is clinical dosing information available in the studies, we pull it together for the condition search. So by clicking on the dosing data in a new window, you see a breakdown based on whatever you filtered for in the dashboard. So here you have a breakdown of the study. Each study is a row You have the study title, a key findings breakdown, the form of administration, in this case, mostly in ingestion, but there is some inhalation down there. And then a very short dosing information on what the compound was. In this case, it's anxiety. Not surprised to see a lot of CBD, but you'll also notice Selexin, which is a essential oil compound based on, it's a derivative of lavender oil, so it's heavy in linalool. And I'm sure many of you understand linalool, lavender is good for anxiety. And so not too surprised to see that here, but nowhere else is the clinical dosing information aggregated in this way. And this we feel is some of the more useful information when considering patient pathway possibilities. So that opens in a new window. I'm just going to close that. There's a chemotype guidance here, the studies associated with chemotype. And the chemotypes, there's 3 of them. As you see here, chemotype 1 is, this is the ratio of THC to CBD. So this doesn't cover, our data bank covers all the endocannabinoid sciences, but this is spotlights cannabis and particularly that THC CBD ratio. Chemotype 1 is high THC and low CBD. Chemotype 2 is balanced ratio, roughly from about 4:1 to 1:4 THC to CBD. And chemotype 3 is high CBD, low THC. So this provides a little bit of a compass heading on where the direction is of the science with cannabis-based compounds and preparations. And so again, it's not too surprising if I mouse over it, you can see the number of studies that show up, 17 for 37, sorry, for chemotype 3, just 5 for chemotype 2 and 7 for higher THC preparations. Here's the studies by country of researcher. There could be multiple ones, multiple countries per study, because a lot of them are research groups across borders. But this is quite useful. And the US has a lot of studies. Unfortunately, they're not able to do a lot of the studies people would like to do here, but hopefully that will be changing very soon. And then lastly, there's a synopsis developed by Uwe that is a text form of the state of the science that we continually review and especially look at when there's new clinical data. But what we want to do is have that short form available if someone wants to take a quick look. But a lot of the elements of the dashboard are indicating what some of that direction is. Now, below the dashboard, you actually see a list of the studies available. Now, there's a lot to go through here. I just wanted to give a quick glance, but I want to come back up and come over to this panel on the left, which is the filtering panel. There are some quick links to jump to different parts of the page. The condition overview is at the bottom. That provides some information, including ICD-10 associations with click-throughs to the ICD-10 site. There's also some drug interaction and dosing consideration. Now, this is overall information is not associated with the search, but shows up at the bottom of the searches. You can also then search for a new condition from here or do a keyword search. But really where the filtering gets interesting, especially when there's a lot of science and there's growing science here. So say you wanted to see, I just want to look at what the clinical science says for this condition. So I'm going to click all clinicals, or I could click the 2 study types here. And you can see quickly the dashboard has reordered. And you can see that it still has the 18 studies here. There are 6 related clinical studies, but you can see the dashboard has changed a little bit. The positivity rate, as you saw before, is 89, but now it's 89 for everything. Clinical dosing number is the same because we're filtering for clinical, but you can see here, they're studying chemotype 3. That's what they studied for. That's what the lower level studies have indicated. And you can see where the studies are being done, Germany and Austria. And frankly, that's because of linalool. And that's where Selexin has been studied and is mostly available. But you can find it on Amazon actually here in the States as well. And you can add additional filters. So say you just want to see the CBD studies related, because you can see that chemotype heading. So coming back up, 9 total studies, 6 primary associations for CBD. You can see the positivity rate is now 100%. And there's dosing for 5 studies. You could click through that and just see that output. And I would come down here and there's the 9 studies. So just in a few clicks, you've quickly distilled down what was over 140 studies down to just the clinical results that you can click through and review. And quickly, I'll note here on these, you can see that yes, the year of publication, the type of study, the title, but these sigils also provide some information as well. And those the XY shows that there is sub-ratio information, which is if there's a specific chemotype involved, what's the sub-ratio, the actual ratio of THC to CBD? And then the milligrams tell us if there's dosing information available. So I'm just going to pick one of these, and I'll pick the most recent one. So a user can click through and get a little more information. So the big sigil here tells us that it's chemotype 3. There's the key findings. Results demonstrated CBD significantly decreased anxiety. You can see the sample size of the study, the N number, and 37. It's a smallish study, but not too bad. They utilized a hemp extract. Chemotype 3, it's a 0 to 1, so the sub-ratio, it's all THC. There's no CBD, as it was a hemp extract, maybe fractional amounts of THC. And the dosage here was 300 milligrams in a single dose in the afternoon. It was in Japan in 2019. And if you'd like, you can click through and say, well, where'd you get this information? The study, you can click right through and review it. So what we're trying to do overall is to save time and help users find the most important information as quickly as possible. And that list could quickly be distilled with a few clicks and pulling links that what might take, better part of an hour or more to find these studies can just take a few minutes. And that's what we're hoping to do, is to really support and accelerate the engagement with patients and improve the consistency of care. So coming back up, I can clear the filter and do some other searches, but I want to run in the time we have just to take a peek at the Cannabinoid Dashboard. So search is a very similar way to get in. You can drop down from here. Top 20 cannabinoids by number of clinical studies. Here's the top 20. And you can see it's a mix of things and some things you might not recognize because this again is a data bank of all of the endocannabinoid sciences. So it includes some things other than cannabis phytocannabinoids. And here's the breakdown at the bottom of the different baskets that we have in here for cannabinoids. And so we have these primary phytocannabinoids. We're always reviewing new conditions and new compounds and new cannabinoids for inclusion as the science continues to expand. And so we added some recent ones. There's been an explosion of Delta-8 science. So we added that relatively recently. But you can also see here, there's synthetic cannabinoids. So these are synthesized in a lab. These are the different families like 5F or ABX, AM. You would note them by in AM-X, they would be AM and the number. And some of these you might have heard of. Spice is, the street spice, that's synthetic cannabinoid, is one of these compounds. They're very strong. Many of them are used in research, but some of them have been explored with applications for clinical applications with humans. We have our endogenous cannabinoids, our endocannabinoids. These are internal cannabinoids that are created by our body. And there's also in this list some key enzymes that degrade those endocannabinoids. And a lot of the science is involved with understanding the degradation rates of the endocannabinoids. And so blocking, say, FA, fatty acid amine hydrolase, which degrades anandamide, the bliss molecule, as is known, blocking that and retaining higher levels of anandamide, there's some interesting science around that. We're also tracking some other compounds and echinaceas in the database now, but we're tracking some other ones, including capsaicin and some others that do have some noticeable and significant binding affinities to some of our ECS receptor sites. And then lastly, we have the pharmaceutical cannabinoids preparations like Epidiolex, nabiximols, and Marinol. We have those associated by chemotype at this point, but we are planning to break those out by individual cannabinoids and individual pharmaceutical, because that's going to be really useful for practitioners, especially when talking to patients about maybe exploring Epidiolex. So I'm going to go through here, select CBD. So we'll go to one of the big ones. And you'll notice some little differences in the dashboard since it's not a specific medical condition. So we have the same breakdown up top of primary and related studies, and then the clinical and preclinical breakdown. So unsurprisingly, there's quite a bit of science here, a little over 100 primary clinical studies. We have some other different information in the dashboard, the studies by organ system. You can mouse over and see the associations for different organ systems. And that's just a little bit of a header about where the science is going and what might be efficacious, from a systemic view, what might be useful.
Doug, can we click on those organ systems from there?
No, but what you
Okay.
can do is just to the left here in the filter. If you just
Perfect.
wanted to see any of them, you could filter on them here.
Okay.
Studies by researcher again. Studies by receptor sites, which are an interesting guide because it moves beyond CB1 and CB2 to the TRPV1 and the other GPCR receptors, which CB1 and CB2 are G protein coupled receptors. Now here's some really good guidance when it comes to the cannabinoids, and the terpenes have these outputs as well. So these are the top conditions related to the whatever you've searched, in this case CBD. So this is just associations. And so epilepsy has many: multiple sclerosis, Lennox-Gastaut, brain cancer, Parkinson's. So you can quickly see they're doing a lot of research here, but where is the clinical research? Where are those conditions? And those are down here. So if you look at these are the clinical, where there's been clinical research for CBD, these are the conditions that we've associated. And these are all live links you can click through. Probably the best way to do it from here, this is your compass heading. The best way to go about it would be to click through, like anxiety and panic disorders, and then sort by CBD, kind of like we did just a moment ago. But I just wanted to show you a quick filter to why you help break things down when there's a lot of science like this. So I filtered by digestive system, and you can see here, it broke the studies down significantly to just 5 when it comes to CBD and digestive health. It does bring in some other organ systems in here involved, because some of these studies are involved, associated with multiple systems. But you can see the list of conditions here that are primary conditions associated with these studies. And so quickly, you've distilled down the digestive impacts on the digestive science as it's been done in clinical settings for CBD. And that's quite useful for anybody. If someone's asking, if Uwe said, if somebody with inflammatory bowel disease comes in, this is a quick way to understand where this clinical evidence is for CBD in this case. And you can do the same thing for with other cannabinoids, or you can go through at the top, you could go jump over to the organ system search and then filter by the other cannabinoids from there. So we wanted to create these multiple searches to give people a lot of different ways in to the same information, because there is some relevance, and some of that takes a little time to explore, because there's a lot of rabbit holes to go down with this. And you can see here, if I said, all right, show me digestive system, now I want to see just the clinical studies. So it'll break it down to just those 5, as well as there's one related. So coming down here, there's still those same 4 conditions. And very quickly for CBD, you've distilled it down to just the clinical science associated with digestive disorders. So again, very useful information, including nuggets like this: low dose CBD is safe but not effective in the treatment for Crohn's disease, a randomized controlled trial. And for someone like Crohn's disease, like me, this was a pretty useful bit of information that I ran across as Uwe, Dave, and I put this platform together. And that's very useful information for a clinician, and certainly for a patient or consumer as they're walking into a dispensary. So I'm just, at this point, I would bring it back to you guys, Sandra and Ivory. Do you have any questions, or do we want to bring in questions from anybody else? I know I've gone on for a little bit of time here. I wanted to give everybody a taste, but
That is
any
awesome.
thoughts or comments?
Just from searching several of our Facebook pages, I think the general takeaway that I've seen several times is game changer. So I wanted to share that, and actually, if I can find it again, Dr. Carrie Clark actually responded on one. While I'm looking for hers, I was going to ask, as far as when well, here it is. She said, this is going to be a game changer for finding the evidence to support the work with our cannabis patient. And I think that pretty much sums it up, and it's so user-friendly. Just is no reason, for you not to have the data literally at your fingertips. And so I just thank you guys for making this available.
It's awesome. I mean, I used it, like I said before, I literally just started using it, and I felt like Wow, like my workflow was so much less, because I was able to go through, and I still had to look at the studies. I still have to educate myself, but I cut down on the time. That searching time, I will tell you, takes forever. I always tell people, I'll send you my notes in an hour, and then 2 hours later, I'm still swirling around on Google, or inside PubMed or wherever else. So this was awesome. My question for you is, as how do you decide, like you have cannabinoids and you have all these different things, how do you, and I know that cannabinoids, it's such a, there's like, so all these cannabinoids now that are starting to become, more recognized. I don't think we know enough about all the cannabinoids that exist, and so my question is, how does that come into play? Like, do you look for a cannabinoid to have so many studies before it's included? Do you how does that play with changes? Because we're going to see changes. We're going to see more studies, more things. And every day I feel like I turn on the TV and they're like, cannabis is now great for this. How does that work into, one, validating it, at the credibility and the, whether it's worth including here, does it have to come from a journal publication? Like how do you guys go and source this is my question, I guess, when you have these new emerging conditions, cannabinoids, or, what have you?
Well, we do try to source from the higher quality journals, and certainly PubMed and Cochrane and the really healthcare-based databases are where we start. So we do try to find the best science, but we're always reviewing anything available, and we look at a lot of articles, and we look at a lot of newsletters, frankly, of a lot of different groups who are bringing science out and bringing that news. But when it comes to whether we are adding new conditions or new cannabinoids, we're constantly reviewing, and we feel that if there's a few studies that provide some insight and some guidance, we will create the new condition and load it in and load the studies. And that can be just a handful of studies, 2, 3, 4, 5, but especially if there are clinical studies. If there are clinical studies for something, and we want to be able to show that there's especially that sort of data. So if there's just 3 studies and one of them's clinical, then odds are we're going to put that in as quickly as possible. And we're adding some resources and adding some ways to make sure that we can find the information more quickly. But yeah, our goal, our value proposition to the healthcare community is we want to stay on top of the science, because it is an important data stream, but it is not the only data stream. But it is a very tricky one. So we want to be able to present this information quickly and allow the caregivers and the educators and the researchers to bring in the other data streams that might be their experience, patient trends, the case studies that they have in their own experience, and contrast them with the science. So this is just another tool to support the process that Uwe kind of outlined at first, which is an ongoing one of adjusting approach and understanding all the variables.
So you mentioned something before, which I think is really important to highlight, because we know that our audience is health professionals, but we have a great number of advocates also that listen into these streams. You mentioned before with this helping support policy change and things of that nature. Give us a little bit about that and how they could use this in their, advocacy work, or, working in legislation and things like that, because I feel like this is so useful that of course it shouldn't be just relegated to us, nurses and physicians, but that there's so many other people that could use this.
Sure, no, happy to. In my experience, I've done some work in the compassion space for a number of years, supporting low-income patients in the California Bay Area where I live. And as California was going, as the legal market, the recreational market was opening up, there were some questions about whether the compassion frameworks would continue. So I was involved with groups that were really pushing for that to happen. And we had to ultimately fight for a certain level of medical awareness for these different conditions, for these different patient populations, that cannabis, and cannabis and access needed to continue for these groups, particularly, some of the childhood diseases, for PTSD and veterans, for low income folks. It was critical. And I had the opportunity to use the Cannakeys 360 platform in beta to inform when we were at hearings in Sacramento around these, to bring some of the science and counterpoint some of the more conservative perspectives about a lack of the science, when we were able to say, no, there's actually this many clinical studies for this condition, and speak to it with some effectiveness, and speak to immediately to sharing links if that was part of the, if that was necessary. So if you come down here, I'm on Insomnia, and you can see the state of the science. This is just for chemotype 3, but there's EU approved medicines that are associated with the endocannabinoid system. They are cannabis ones that are available in the EU. And there's an overall 100% positivity rate. The state of the science is certainly a spectrum across a lot of the conditions, as Uwe said, but some of them, it's quite well developed. And I think it can help counterpoint a more prohibitionist mindset that you can run into with a certain fear that is born of not really understanding the kind of information we're talking about today.
That's awesome. No, I know Ivory's going to chime in. Ivory's my policy and politics person, so she's, I can see her little brain going now. So I'm gonna let her chime in because I see she's got something.
No, I was just going to ask questions for put out questions from I'm seeing in the chat. One of them is under the preclinical studies. Are those studies that have been started, but the findings are not conclusive yet? They're ongoing or underway?
No, these are preclinical studies. They are just not working, as you can see here, if you go over to the info bubble, that they're just not conducted on humans.
Okay.
And that's ultimately what preclinical versus clinical means. And so all these studies are published. We want to get to the point where we're tracking studies in progress, so we kind of know what's coming and can maybe tip the community about what's being developed and what's being worked on. But no, these are all, if you wanted to, oops, that's not what I wanted to click. If you wanted to really understand what those are, you can come over here and say, well, show me the meta-analyses for insomnia and sleep disorders. Come down and you can get an idea of just looking that they're more general, like this is a large case series for CBD and anxiety and sleep, cannabis expectancies for sleep. They're more general studies, but they have some pretty good value. And I would note when it comes to meta-analyses, really the gold standard of studies overall is a meta-analyses of clinical studies. And now that we're starting to see a number of clinical studies being done for different conditions, we're just starting to see meta-analyses being done that are all for clinical studies. So we are working on adding that. There's some space here, so we're going to add another box here so you can see a breakdown of and filter on just the meta-analyses for clinical studies for the condition. And so that's going to be pretty exciting because that's going to add a next level of quality to the outputs. They're in there, but right now we can't aggregate on them. They will show up as double-blind placebos or human clinicals if those are mixed in as well.
Okay. So that makes sense. So thank you for that update on that. The other question is, does Cannakeys suggest keywords or related keywords as you search?
Now we don't have suggestions, but if someone wants to come in and they're just wanting to know, well, what do you have for pain? Mm-hmm. Well, there's a lot of different kinds of pain. And there's a lot of conditions with specific associated pain where there's been specific science. So we would suggest starting with the keyword search. So here you can see just searching on pain, you have acute pain, chronic pain, cancer, eye pain, menstrual pain and associated conditions, then the neuropathies, labor and delivery. So there's using the keyword search is a good way to find out what conditions, how we've created these umbrellas for the different studies. And really the science is and how that's been articulated has been our guide to doing that. But that's a way I would suggest somebody coming in who's like, where do I go from here? Where do I start? If they don't have a specific condition they're searching for, I would either try the keyword search or come back to the medical condition, as we saw at the beginning, and review the quick links of the full list, and even just give that a scan to see what's in there, from hair loss to gout to myeloma and beyond. There's a lot there. We also have some interesting ones like cannabis adverse effects, which shows, and cannabis hyperemesis syndrome, which there's a lot of science there, but there's nothing. And cannabis hyperemesis syndrome is when cannabis use is associated with really violent vomiting and nausea.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but you can see here, they're really not studying it to find out what did it. These studies were funded by prohibitionists who wanted to find something that was bad about cannabis. But we, again, are being faithful reporters, and we want to bring the science that's related and have people look at it. But as you can see, there's no clinical studies around what that presentation really means with relation to cannabis. They're almost 100% meta-analyses.
With the terpenes, out of my curiosity, and because I love the plant so much and I love the benefits of the terpenes. So I know that when we're looking at the terpenes, when you were in, when you're pulling up the search by terpenes,
Mm-hmm.
When you're searching by terpenes, are you searching for terpenes on the cannabis plant, or can it be terpenes on other plants? Like, because I know when I see studies sometimes and I look for terpenes, they give me studies of like, lavender or cloves or, different things. So are these specifically on the cannabis plants?
What was specific to cannabis was really our starting point about where to look for the science and what terpenes to include in the data bank. And so that was really our starting place, but we did want to bring in the terpene information so it was a little more complete. So we've continued to review the terpenes for more broader applications that include, say, essential oils and other plant and other material extracts, as you were just saying, Sandra. And you can see here, this is the Linalool dashboard. And you can see, as you did in the cannabinoids, you can see that there's a number of conditions that have been, these are primary associations for linalool research. Many of them are Selexin, but there are some other ones in there too. So we've expanded beyond it, because if there's somebody who really wants to work with terpenes or is doing some other things with, say, essential oils or other herbs, we wanted this to be useful to them as well, to really be, again, a good aggregation of the terpene research.
I love it. I mean, okay, so right now we can search by organ system, terpene, cannabinoid, and
condition.
Do we plan to expand that to any other things in the future, or are you sticking specifically with those four? This is just curiosity, because I love it. It's so exciting for me. I'm a nerd, as you can tell. I love it.
Well, you're in good company. We are too. Well, at this point, we feel like these are the most impactful and important searches. We're always open for feedback and suggestions and ideas. And there's ways to contact us on our website at the bottom. Yeah. But, we're definitely looking at some other ways to apply the science and to output it. We're interested in doing a more patient-focused and cannabis-focused output version, because there's a lot of information here. And if someone goes to the cannabinoid search and sees a lot of these other numbers and letters with X's after them, it can be overwhelming. And this is, like Uwe talked about at the start, there's so many different variables to consider and to understand. So we're looking at different ways to apply the information, but we feel like these are a good 360 view of the science right now and ways to dig in.
So how long has Cannakeys been, how long ago did you release this? I think you said it before, but maybe I missed that part.
This is, it's pretty brand new. We've been working on it since 2016.
Okay.
Kind of building it out and doing the architecture. And we went live at the end of last year, but we really launched in January. So this is, it's pretty brand new.
Yeah.
And
so my question is,
but we're spreading the word.
Yes. So the question is, and I had one other question was, since you have this new platform, how have you seen people integrate this into whether it's policy, politics, legislation, or in their practice?
You know, the frontline adopters are cannabis nurses. We can say that with a lot of confidence. So go cannabis nurses. Well, they're looking for the science, and they're looking for really working with patients and how to provide the best guidance available. And so we're thrilled that they look to Cannakeys and this platform as something that's really useful. So we're thrilled. So it's been cannabis healthcare, but the other group has been educators, because for students just getting into these, to have an easy access form to understand the data of the science is a big leg up for the students and for the faculty. So we've been excited in the conversations that we've been having with universities that are starting or expanding their cannabinoid health platforms and classes. And we're talking to, we've onboarded some, and we're working with some others. And that's really exciting, because that feels like the future practitioners and the future educators and the future legislators are getting a taste for and really digging deep on what this is about. So that's where we're looking to go. Is we've talked to some advocacy groups, and we have some affiliates, and we're talking some others at the national level and doing some outreach internationally as well. We're having conversations with those as well. But yeah, it really starts with cannabis healthcare and with educators.
I love it. No, this is amazing. I will say that I didn't watch the demo or anything. I was just like tired of looking up all the studies every time. And, one thing that I do know, as you said, nurses, we're kind of taking the helm here when it comes to cannabis education and all this stuff. But one thing that I will say is that, people depend on us to give them that evidence-based knowledge and information. So for me, it was, I wouldn't send anyone anywhere, not even to a dispensary, without telling them why, this was, my, information that I would share with them, or recommendation. I hate using that word because it gets so, construed differently in this arena, but you know what I mean? And so literally having this was awesome. I will say that I went in there. I actually did one for PCOS, and I ended up looking under, I don't think it was organ system. Let's see, let's try it, because it wasn't under organ system. When I typed in PCOS, I think I did it under keyword search. And then,
what organ system?
or maybe I did it under condition, and I think it took me under, maybe I was under condition. And so there were some studies, but I realized when I was doing, looking at this, that it gave me so much more information, because it kind of gave me an idea of, well, who, like you said, who's conducting these studies and where are they happening at? And it was such a quick, picture of where we are versus, it was under uterine, I think it was under uterine, something. But I think that was one of the conditions I was able to look up. And so it was just such a quick, under uterine and endometrial cancers. I think there is something under there for PCOS. It's either here, as you're looking through. But what I loved about it was that it gave me a snapshot, because I don't get a snapshot when I go to, do my searching. And usually what happens is when I send someone some information to kind of support what their condition is or their situation, I usually will send them like a ton of links. It's like, well, there's this link, and this is kind of what I think about that study, and another link, and this is kind of what I think about this study. But this is great, because I could really just give them like a snapshot, like even just a screenshot. Look, these are the studies that, let me know which one you would like to see or read more on, and then I can send you a link to that. But based on, this is excellent. It's such an easy tool. We have a lot of nurses in cannabis nurses of color, and just in the industry as a whole. I feel like it's a new emerging industry. There's not many people who are hands-on working with patients, and people are trying to get into that space and place. And I think this is a great tool to have, a great resource. I was showing them, this is my books are like everywhere, and sometimes you just want to be able to find something quickly. I usually have to go into some of these books. They don't even have the conditions in the index. I have sticky notes, as you can see in all the books. And that's how I find.
Books have binders and lists and folders on their computer.
Yeah, so this is excellent, and I think it'll really give a lot of nurses that are coming into this industry and trying to, kind of get their footing. It'll give them that extra step of confidence because they can have the research there. The other thing was with anxiety and depression, it's quite interesting because I always have to explain to my clients that they may need, especially if they're using CBD, that it's going to be way more than the 25 milligrams or whatever that it says on the bottle. They never want that. They don't want to hear that. And it was great to see the dosing because they were like 400 milligrams. I was like, wow. So it just gave me more confidence when I'm talking and I'm sharing that information with them, when I can say, look at these studies and this is what's out there. So don't worry if it seems a little bit more than you expected. This is where what the information is showing.
Yeah, it's where the science is right now. And at least
yeah,
it is where the available information is.
Yes, I am going to. So I'm actually going to share, because I know you gave us a code that we can share with people if they want to purchase Cannakeys. And I think I can share my screen and share that possibly. I'm a terrible screen sharer, so just bear with me here. But no, I think that everything that you guys presented today was just absolutely wonderful. We had a great opportunity to not only see it in action, but also, learn more about why, Cannakeys exist and kind of how we can use it to, benefit not only us as professionals, but really the most important people are our patients and, our clients, because they're the ones who need it the most. So I am going to, I think.
I got it open. I could share it.
You can, share it for me, please. Thank you, Doug.
Sure. So yeah, we're really pleased to engage with you all. And as soon as it comes up, so there it is. So we'd like to offer the Cannabis Nurses of Color community a 30% discount. And this is good until next Sunday. So if you go in and through that pricing portal, you can see the different options that we have available. We offer all 4 searches, but we also offer, if someone just wants to, if they're on a tighter budget and they just can get the medical condition search. And obviously there's a lot you can do with that. But there's a coupon box in checkout, and you can use CN of C30 to get a 30% discount, which is ongoing. So you can stay connected to the platform at that discount going forward.
We appreciate that. That is so awesome. I highly suggest, if you are in this industry, if you're educating people, if you're whatever you're doing, even if I was just doing my podcast and talking, to the public at large, this would still be useful for me. I think it's awesome. I keep fangirling at this because I'm like, oh, it's available and it's easy and it's accessible and take my money. What do you?
It's a great tool, and we're thankful for it. And as you can see, on behalf of all of the nurses in the cannabis space, we're excited about this to be able to use. I think Mr. Bleshing was going to say something else. I think he turned his mic off.
No, one thing I wanted to point out, when I like books. Books there's something about holding it and learning and reading and taking notes and stuff. But the data is moving so rapidly that one of the reasons why we really wanted to move forward with an electronic version of a book is because it gives you a chance to be as updated as possible. So in other words, you'll have, we wanted to create a live textbook, which is in a way a live meta-analysis of the currently available literature. And so I have to give up a little bit of my book loving approach to learning and to remembering and to searching for for valuable information, and use my computer to, I can't tell you how many times I go into it myself, because I have to refresh my mind because somebody asked me something and I forgot, and I have to look it up again, and it's so much faster and so much quicker, and it's always updated, and so I'm shifting. I'm at least in this case,
Yeah.
I'm moving electronic.
We're all moving. I mean, that's basically the way of the world. I think, we haven't been moving for a year, but everything else is moving, okay? Because developments and things are still happening. So this is awesome. We had some very good feedback. This was awesome. I will definitely use this platform. Thank you for clarifying. This is very informative. Thank you. This is going to be, that was Dr. Clark. She's definitely saying you guys are a game changer. I mean, this has all been, I love talking to you guys. I want to hear, as you guys keep developing and, any updates, please come back and share with us. We are going to actually be going live in our community in a bit. And so we'll kind of give them a little refresher of what we talked about today and send them back to watch this video, because you guys did a great kind of tour. So this was awesome. So I can't say enough. Thank you so much. If you guys want to learn more, Cannakeys.com.
Right.
Cannakeys.com. And again, the code is CN of C, like Cannabis Nurses of Color, CN of C 30 at checkout, and you guys can get that 30% off. I highly recommend it. Definitely do. So thank you guys so much. Thank you for your time. I appreciate you joining us on a Sunday. Uwe and Doug, thank you so much.
Our pleasure. Nice to be with you.
All righty.
Thanks, Sandra.
Take care.
Our
Yes.
pleasure.
All right. Take care.